getting better and questioned what our relationship was, I told her that she could decide that once she processed her feelings for me. As much as it hurt, I didn't want her to feel forced to be with me if she didn't feel love anymore. Soon after, she started demonstrating affection in weird ways. She would bite me over time with greater intensity and lick my arms or neck, all the while still unwilling to hug me often or even kiss. After that, I would wake up in the middle of the night and find her standing next to me staring. Often, I'd shriek in horror at the sudden sight of a dark figure in front of me. But as it became a common occurrence, I got used to it. Every time I asked her what she was doing, she told me she couldn't sleep that night and that watching me sleep helped her sleep as well. I began growing increasingly worried, but as she never once hurt me while I slept, I tried to bear with it as best as I could. To make things simple, I had her use one of my emails so she could learn how to use my computer at the start since her laptop got destroyed in the attack. After she had readjusted, it became a habit for her to keep using that email while using my PC. Even though her phone had her normal email in it, she didn't seem to find any reason to switch emails or even manage multiple accounts anymore. She was comfortable simply using what was on each device by default. A few months ago, while using my computer alone, I decided to check my browser history to look for a website I was visiting the day prior and had forgotten the name of. Naturally, the searches there were a mix of mine and hers. So I didn't bat an eye when I saw random video searches I didn't look for, or the odd site here and there. That was until a specific search caught my eye. Jobs that work with fresh corpses. This was quite off-putting, but I tried to rationalize that maybe she was writing again and needed some inspiration. After all, her memory loss also came with changes to her interests. And while she no longer was into writing, she developed a taste for horror that could be leading into perhaps writing stories of a different genre. The odd search got me curious, and I began to look further down the search history. I could find a lot of true crime, urban legends, and close encounters with monsters. I also noticed that every few weeks she would look for reports on the incident that took her parents' life, often looking at the original publications and the few updates made throughout the initial months. Although she didn't seem to remember it, she appeared to have gained some sort of morbid curiosity for the subject. As I scrolled back closer to Christmas, closer to the time I began teaching her how to use my computer, I found more crude search results such as human rituals, how to show emotions, how to live with others, common roadkill sites, looked for specifically with the name of our town in the search, and is it socially acceptable to eat another human? I had a deeply unsettling feeling, but I couldn't come to any conclusions yet. From then on, I began observing Emma more closely, and at the same time, she began getting more involved in doing housework. While she would refuse to cook, she'd always watch me prepare meals for the both of us. On one occasion, I cut my finger while chopping some vegetables, and before I could react, Emma had it in her mouth, sucking the blood out. She said she just wanted to help, but I decided to be more helpful after that odd display. When she looked at me, I noticed how her calm demeanor hid something behind it, something I didn't understand at that point, yet still made me feel uncomfortable. I decided to set up a hidden camera with night vision in my living room, pointed at the couch where I slept. I checked the footage recorded at night on a phone app that came with the camera and noticed her nightly visits continued. Now, if not from the start, they were happening every single night. Over time, I installed more hidden cameras around the house, making sure they weren't many to reduce the chance of her finding them. After watching the footage, I noticed that she had a habit of always standing in front of the window, peeking through the blinds and looking at me as I drove off. Then she'd walk to my computer or sit down and simply look at videos or read things all day long. That blank unchanging expression she used to have coming back and only leaving once I was back or where she had to leave the house. Originally, she didn't leave the house much, but as she became more comfortable being alone, she gradually made a habit of getting groceries on her own while I was at work, messaging me to ask if I wanted anything. Knowing what I knew, this started to look suspicious as well. So, one day I decided to follow her to clear my doubts. That day I took the day off and lied to her, telling her I was heading to work. The day before, I placed a tracker in her car. I bought a few days earlier, and that morning, I snuck out a change of clothes and a pair of binoculars in my suitcase. Then drove my car to a parking lot near a car rental place to rent one for the day. After that, I switched clothes, checked the tracker on the app, and began following her around. I felt guilty about returning to my old ways and disappointing Miss Price, but I told myself this time wasn't out of jealousy or insecurity. Rather, it was due to fear for my safety. She did what any normal person would do: visit the mall and a few smaller stores. The thing that scared me the most was what I found she did after. I followed Emma back home, making sure to keep my distance and parked the car a few streets away, far enough to be unnoticed and close enough to use my binoculars. After she parked and carried the groceries inside, I looked at my phone and accessed the camera's app to look at her in real time. She took everything out of the bags and put everything in its respective place, but left a block of raw meat. I think it was beef out on the counter. Next, she got a mop and a bucket, took off all her clothes, threw them on a nearby couch, grabbed a chunk of meat, and began eating it. My jaw hit the bottom of the car as I looked at my now ex-girlfriend eating raw meat with nothing on. The fresh blood dripping down her mouth and into her chest and abdomen in a way that reminded me of some sort of satanic ritual or the like. I felt sick to my stomach, unsure if this was some sort of mental illness or something else. And the somewhat low quality of the chewing noises and her grunts simply added to the bizarre experience. Then, as I recovered from the shock and tried to make sense of what I was seeing and hearing, I recalled her search history and her strange fascination with the attack that killed her parents. I believe in the paranormal, but had never experienced anything myself. And I was wondering if what attacked Emma and her parents that day wasn't a bear, but something else. If maybe, just maybe, my beloved girlfriend had fallen victim to the monster as well, and it had come back pretending to be her. Looking back at the video feed, she kept eating the entire chunk of meat, probably about 4 pounds, though I couldn't really tell from the video alone, until it was completely gone. It was an insane amount of meat that no human should eat in a single day, let alone in a single meal. After that, she mopped down the floor, cleaned herself with a few napkins, brought them to the bathroom, and flushed them down the toilet. Lastly, she went to take a shower. All the evidence of her feast gone. Were it not for me having a recording of it, as far as I could tell, this was the first time she did something like that in the house. No other recordings showed her doing anything like that in the past. That night, I came back home, still pretending to have worked. Fortunately, she didn't ask about it, and we spent the night peacefully. Just in case, I put the phone in my pajama pants, grabbed a kitchen knife, and slid it under my pillow before going to bed. I was twisting and turning, unable to sleep in the slightest. Suddenly, I heard the door of my room open, and I pretended to be asleep as Emma walked towards me and stood right in front of the couch. I half opened my eyes and saw the woman I used to love, her face perfectly illuminated by moonlight, mine obscured by penumbra. From that experience, I was able to understand the look in her eyes, that look that had sent shivers down my spine multiple times, even though I didn't know why. It was hunger, a ravenous, primal hunger. I was her prey. I couldn't move. My breathing started to get heavy, and I had to do my best to keep it under control. I pretended to be asleep while that thing kept looking at me. It felt like I was stuck in that uncomfortable space for hours. But whatever the actual time was, she left after a while. When I felt the danger had passed, I was finally able to sleep again, and did so almost immediately. I woke up again with a sudden jolt of pain and found Emma, or the thing masquerading as her, kneeling down and biting down on my left arm. I tried pulling away, and she bit off a chunk of skin without mercy. "What is wrong with you?" I asked, the adrenaline quickly rushing through my body as I went on high alert and pushed her away, grabbing the knife with my right hand and pointing it at her while trying to step back. Her words came out so desperate, her voice almost guttural and uncanny. "I'm sorry, it's just your fear. It makes me even hungrier." I leapt back onto the couch and put my free hand in the back seat to try and flip around. But the weight I put all of a sudden made the couch fall backwards, and I stumbled sideways onto the floor behind, falling on my left side while the knife flew off my hand and landed nearby in between me and the front door. I looked back and Emma was leaping at me like an animal, landing next to my left leg and biting into the calf, even through the thick fabric of the pants I was wearing. I felt her teeth sinking into my skin like sharp needles, and while trying to kick at her with my other leg in an awkward way, I used my healthy hand to try and reach for the knife. Her mouth wouldn't leave my calf, and it wasn't until she managed to rip yet another chunk of my flesh that she finally let me go. A hole in my pants with blood soaking into the fabric was the only indication that it was my only chance to leave. As it was clear I couldn't fight this thing, I crawled pathetically towards the knife and picked it up, then leaned against the wall next to the front door to unlock it while the creature, now almost completely feral, struggled, trying to spit out the cloth stuck in its teeth. The next part was a blare. I recall opening the door and crawling out before closing it behind me. I think the adrenaline coursing through my veins was working overtime, because next thing I knew, I was running out into the street in the middle of the night, while the thing chased behind me. I don't know how long that went for, but I'm sure that, had I not closed the door while it was distracted, it would have caught up to me before I was saved. I didn't know how this happened. As I lost consciousness when help arrived, I woke up a few days later, finding myself with bandages not only on my calf and wrist but also on my stomach. I was told by one of the doctors that the damage I had incurred required surgery, and that there were 2 officers waiting for me to wake up to take my statement. I told them what happened, and fortunately, my phone survived the ordeal with just a few cracks on the screen. I showed them some of what I had gathered, leaving out any of my paranormal theories, and told them she began acting crazier and crazier since the accident with her parents. After explaining everything, I found out what happened after I fell unconscious. A truck with some college guys coming back from a party stumbled across Emma in the middle of the road, digging her teeth into the side of my gut while I was unconscious. They said that the car's headlights startled her, and at that moment, they noticed what she was doing. They figured she was some sort of junkie and tried to scare her away. Fortunately, they had weapons on them. So, after a few warning shots, the thing skewered away into the nearby woods. The guys called the police and an ambulance for me, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. That was 2 months ago. Since then, government officials came to my home and confiscated my cameras and electronics. I didn't fight them on it, though I was upset I wouldn't be allowed to have any video evidence of what happened. I was told there would be no further issues, but that I should change the locks and get a weapon just in case. The story that was given to the press was that Emma had suffered a mental breakdown and attacked me, but ran off before police could get to where the guys found me and hadn't been found since. 9 people have gone missing in that time span. The first 5 were homeless, and sadly that meant the police didn't put too much effort in the investigations. 2 weeks ago, a cargo worker, a nurse and a teacher went missing as well. This caused a larger stir in the public, and I hoped it was just a coincidence, but something told me that it might be involved. Yesterday I found that there was a new victim in the news. It was Miss Price, whom I returned to for therapy after I recovered enough from surgery. Now, I find myself alone again, scared of something that might come and try to finish the job. I wonder if this is a punishment for all the wrongs I did in the past. If I got a taste of a perfect life just to be taken away by a force of nature, or perhaps something more malevolent. If someone you love gets in a terrible accident where they're the only survivors and they seem to become a different person after that, be careful. They might not be your loved one anymore. In the 14 years we'd worked at this sweatshop, Sylvia never missed a shift. So when she didn't show up one winter morning, a sour dread swept through my gut. I called her. The line didn't even ring. Something was wrong. I left without permission and began sprinting across the city, slipping across patches of ice concealed beneath the snowfall, frigid air biting at my lungs. She'd spoken oddly on the phone the night before, slurring her words, gushing about the beautiful truths we could discover about Mom within the mangrove forests of Ecuador. All I had to do was finally agree to take the trip with her. She claimed it would be a pilgrimage, a means of healing through communion with our mother's birth country. If we could connect with her, if we could comprehend the tiniest sliver of why she abandoned us, maybe we could forgive her. Maybe we could move on. It was ridiculous, borderline delusional. There was nothing for us in Ecuador. Besides, what could the mangroves teach us about Mom that we hadn't already learned the day she discarded us? Her only children on the streets of Chicago. I kept my mouth shut, though. Sylvia worked hard to salvage our lives. Putting my callous soul on display felt like spitting in her face. Instead, I rolled my eyes, assumed her drunk, and choked out my annual refrain. "We'll go next year, I promise." I never had any intention of saying yes. I had plenty of chances to change my mind, but year after year I coldly withdrew her heartfelt pleas. I'd be lying if I said I didn't experience a similar longing, a yearning for answers that would sometimes keep me up at night, but I suppressed it, forced it down deep. Visiting her country was a symbol, an act of forgiveness. My mother did not deserve forgiveness. Screw her and screw the putrid soil that supported her miserable feet. I would not go to that place, not even for Sylvia. And yet, despite the belief that my stubbornness was completely justified, all I could think about as I raced through the snowfall was the cruel deceit of those 6 little words. "We'll go next year, I promise." I arrived at Sylvia's a little after dawn. Dense overcasts stained her towering apartment complex in ash and grey. I slammed into the fire exit with the broken lock and began bolting up the stairs. Cockroaches skittered from my aching heels. Before long, I was in front of apartment 602, fumbling with my spare key, praying I was wrong, praying my bleak intuition was wildly off the mark. The door jerked open. Hazy light from the hallway trickled into her jet-black apartment. Felt my body go numb. She was on the floor, face down, sprawled out, transfixed and rigid. Her corpse harbored this strange brightness. Her skin seemed to glow in the darkness, shimmering a dull crimson like molten metal that had begun to cool. Carbon monoxide can do that. Apparently, the coroner detailed the pathology to me with a tone-deaf excitement, shaking his wrinkled hands, talking himself breathless. "Carbon monoxide is greedy," he said. "The odorless gas hijacks your blood. That piracy alters the blood cells, displacing precious oxygen and brightening them in the process. That's why the corpses flush. Suffocation makes them shine like a dying star." The whole thing tore me apart. I couldn't swallow the raw brutality of it. Sylvia died alone, completely without ceremony. A quick and meaningless end to a hard-fought life. When we were abandoned, Chicago was bursting at the seams with strays. The city wouldn't have saved us. If social services didn't have enough resources to rescue their own children, what chance did a pair of non-natives have? My sister refused to just lie down and die, though. She found a job. The man running the sweatshop wouldn't allow a 5-year-old to hang around the factory floor. So, while Sylvia toiled away in front of a sewing machine, I hid in the alleyway behind the factory, tucked myself snugly behind this massive battleship of a dumpster at the crack of dawn, and I wouldn't come out until I heard Sylvia knocking a code into the rusted metal, usually well after the sun had set. The hiding spot required painful contortion. Some nights my leg spasms were so violent that she'd have to carry me to whatever underpass we were currently calling home. Before winter, though, Sylvia had earned enough money. We moved what little we had to a tiny apartment in the projects. Once I was old enough, she got me a job at the factory too. The sweatshop was a marginal improvement over the dumpster. The smell inside was slightly less foul, and my calves had a little more wiggle room. Though I couldn't seem to escape the gaze of this lanky boy with pale blue eyes and a cleft upper lip. It took him a few months to work up the nerve to talk to me. We quickly became inseparable. A decade later, Ryan and I welcomed our daughter into the world. Elisa was about to turn 6 when Sylvia died. "I don't want a party this year." She was sulking at the table, stirring a bowl of leathery slush that had once been Cheerios. I barely registered what she had said. I was standing at the sink, staring at the wall, pretending to wash dishes. The nearest golden water felt good on my hands. "Why is that, sweetheart?" Ryan chapped. "Well, Auntie Sil isn't getting one." So Elisa trudged across the kitchen, and dumped the disintegrated cereal into the basin. "It's not fair," she continued. "None of it seems fair. Knife isn't fair." The caustic response spilled from my lips like a quiet exhale. Automatic, thoughtless. When I realized what I'd said, I shifted towards Elisa. She was studying me with wide, unblinking eyes. Her grimace betrayed a painful confusion. This was her first brush with death. Painful confusion had been her default setting for weeks. Her eyes became glassy. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but all that came out was hot air. Ryan scooped her into his arms and forced a smile. "Mommy's not mad. Okay, she's just really tired. Want to go watch some TV?" She pressed her face into his chest and nodded. As he paced out of the kitchen, Ryan shot me a look. That look, Mommy may not have been mad, but Daddy sure was. There was a distant click. The muffled pandemonium of Saturday morning cartoons started echoing through our small home. I sighed and turned off the faucet. Much as I'd been enjoying the hurt, the scalding water had reddened my hands. The sight of flush skin made me want to vomit. Ryan marched back into the kitchen, broad feet slapping across the hardwood. I stuck my hands into my pockets, closed my eyes and braced myself. "The hell was that?" he hissed. I shrugged. "What? You disagree? You think what happened to Sil is fair?" "My God, that is not the point." My blood ignited. I spun around to face him. "Oh, I'm sorry, I had no idea there was a point. Please, Ryan, enlighten me." He glanced towards the living room. "Keep your voice down." I stomped up to him and spat out a single word. "Why?" I glared at him. There was another distant click followed by a high-pitched muted sob. I heard Elisa too, but I would not yield. I wanted him to fight back. My jaw tightened but abruptly went slack. He looked away from me, a reaction more damaging than any insult. "Jesus, where are you right now, Carmen?" I cocked my head, but he didn't elaborate. He walked off to attend Elisa, leaving me in the kitchen to puzzle over what the hell he meant. In retrospect, I think I understand. He was asking me to get a grip, begging me to divest my selfish wrath and realize what's important. The question's effect on me, however, was much more literal than Ryan intended. Where was I? Chicago. But was that where I should be? I couldn't get the question out of my head. It kept repeating, incessant and deafening. Then it hit me. I figured out where I should be. I took a clandestine trip to a nearby pawn shop. My engagement ring wasn't worth much. The stone was only half a carat after all. But it was enough. 800 would cover the plane tickets and a few nights in a hostel. I know how it sounds, but I had a plan. Sylvia wasn't the only one who died from the gas leak. So there were talks of a class action lawsuit against the landlord, as if anything in this world can be considered a guarantee. I convinced myself that those earnings would surely buy the ring back someday. I started to leave around midnight. Our home was silent, saved from my husband's wispy snores and the soft hum of the TV. I slung my backpack over my shoulders and tiptoed into the living room. They had fallen asleep together on the sofa. I stared at Ryan for a while, watching the TV bejeweled his closed eyelids with its opaline flicker. He was going to be furious, but I would never come to terms with her death until I did this. It was my way of making amends. I stuck the post-it note onto his cell phone before slipping out into the cold moonless night. "Flying to Ecuador back in 2 days. We'll text to let you know I'm safe." Then on the adhesive side, a last-minute addition. "Tell Elisa I love her. I landed in Quito at noon. Exiting onto the tarmac, I was struck by an intense disorientation. The flight crew warned us that we might experience altitude sickness. Quito is nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, but I had no idea how immediate and debilitating it would be. The sun was blinding. My head pounded. Every breath was a struggle. Compared to Chicago's thin ozone, the thick tropical air felt like inhaling jelly. Hesitation festered in those breathless moments, but I squashed it. I couldn't turn back. I needed to see this through. I collapsed onto a bench outside the airport, took as deep a breath as I could manage, and switched my phone off airplane mode. A flurry of texts and missed calls flooded the screen, notification after notification. The device was practically convulsing. I sent landed. "I'm okay" to Ryan without letting my eyes linger on the 20 on red text above it. Then I called for a cab. Once they arrived, I returned the device to airplane mode. Quito was at the center of Ecuador, but my destination was closer to the coastline. That's where the mangroves bloom. Whenever she tried to sell me on this pilgrimage, Sylvia always harped on the mangroves. I never asked why, though I suspect she was channeling some fragment of Mom, some piece of her that I had forgotten. Sylvia was 12 when we were abandoned. I was 5. She actually had some memories of the woman. Maybe Mom harped on them too. Maybe the mangroves made her nostalgic for home. All things considered, a nature reserve seemed as good a spot as for a healing communion with the land. It wasn't hard to narrow down which I'd visit. A few miles north of Pinellas, there was a small park that just seemed right. I don't know much about it, but for whatever reason, I couldn't see myself going anywhere else. Luckily, it was beautiful. I was reluctant to acknowledge the beauty at first, but as I stood on the shoreline, basking in the grandeur of what was effectively a tropical swamp, I felt my reluctance melt away. Mangrove roots rose in tangled clusters from the saltwater, ornate yet chaotic, spiraling closer and closer together until they unified as a single trunk. Their canopy was fiercely animated. Small monkeys with slender arms and potbellies swung through the brush and chains. Exotic birds zipped between the branches. Vibrant blurs of color swirling together to manifest a shifting kaleidoscope made with golds and violets and deep, deep reds. I dipped my toes in the water and stared at the forest, and I felt full, buoyant, happy even. Then with a single thought I crumbled. Sylvia should have been here too. I'd been so mean. I stood on the shore for a long while, marinating in an acidic mixture of self-loathing and melancholy, until something odd caught my attention. A man lurking in my peripheral vision. His head was peeking out of the river, wet eyes leering at me through thick strands of soggy grey hair. My eyes snapped forward. There was a stone bobbing on the surface of the river, but no spying man. I whispered the word idiot as I turned to leave the reserve. It was an hour-and-a-half walk to the nearest hostel. I had enough money to afford another cab, but I didn't call one. I didn't deserve the luxury. I lurched along the roadside, head low, bare shoulders baking in the afternoon sun, becoming more despondent with each miserable step. The lush, rolling countryside was exceptionally quiet, a far cry from the ceaseless bluster of Chicago. Under different circumstances, I would have welcomed the tranquility. In the moment, though, the empty air only made the voice in my head seem louder. Why was I here? What did I expect to gain? Insight? Absolution? Levity? Stupid. It was also stupid. So short-sighted, so pointless. All of a sudden, my ears perked. There was a soft, steady crunching a few yards back, the sound of dry grass being crushed under a boot heel. Was someone following me? I paused. The crunching stopped. I bowled my hand into a fist, took a deep breath and whipped my head around, but there was no one. Just the winding road and the sleepy hills. My heart rate slowed when I started walking. The crunching resumed. I peered over my shoulder. Still nothing behind me. I did my best to ignore the unsettling phenomena, but by the time I arrived at the hostel, the sun was setting, my calves were screaming, and my mind was ragged. In other words, I was ready for a drink. My memories of that night are disturbingly incomplete. Here's what I do remember. It begins with me at the back of this dimly lit dive bar. I'm brooding, throwing back liquor at a reckless pace when I'm suddenly approached by a well-dressed man. He's sporting an indigo blazer and black chinos, overdressed for the stifling heat. Up close he smells like brine. The table wobbles when he leans on it, one leg shorter than the others. He steadies my glass with 2 fingers so it doesn't fall. A small wave of brandy laps his gaunt fingertips. He takes his hand out of my glass and sits down. I can't remember whether he introduced himself or just sat down and started talking. Called himself Michael Moole. Mickwell, something like that. Over and over he apologizes. I ask him what for. He claims I already know, but I make him spell it out. For Sylvia, he says, for the way she is fixated on perfectly good air, for the way the gas toyed with her mind, for the terror of her last moments, hallucinating alone in a lightless apartment, for everything really. Wait, did I tell you all this, I ask? He says I probably did. Then he keeps talking. I'm not sure what about. I'm distracted by the whites of his eyes. There's movement. Pinpoints appear, enlarge and then dissolve. Sort of like film grain. The rhythm is hypnotic. I'm comfortably spellbound until he says something that catches my attention. Would you like to commune with your sister? Slowly with apprehension I nod. From there my recollection really fragments. There are breaks, skips in time. Pieces I've lost. I follow him out of the bar, stumbling. I slip on the edge of the doorframe, plunge forward, and close my eyes, preparing myself for the impact. But there's nothing. No collision, no shattering bones, just a clean emptiness, a starving void. When I open my eyes, we're in a van. Michael's driving. I don't see anyone else, but there's laughter, so much laughter. Thousands of shrill, squeaking cackles come from the driver's seat. In excruciating cacophony, enraged wasps probing my eardrums. Welcome home, little leech. Don't be afraid. Your baptism is overdue, but it'll be over before you know it, he says. We're accelerating. I can tell by how the darkened countryside is passing by faster and faster. I plead for him to stop the car, but I can't even hear the words leaving my mouth. And Michael's not even watching the road anymore. He's twisted over the seat, leering at me, pinpoints dancing across the whites of his eyes, and then quiet. In an instant, the laughter's gone. Salty air scrapes my tongue. A bird trills far overhead. I look around. I'm sitting at the front of a small rowboat, floating down a narrow river, hemmed in by gnarled webs of mangrove roots. Moonlight drapes a faint silver membrane over the otherwise shadow-swelled landscape. Behind me I hear something rowing. I know it's Michael, but I don't dare turn around and check. Do you see her? He whispers. I squint carefully, reaching for the root beds. My heart is stammering, my thoughts are frantic. How did I get here? What the hell is going on? Do you see your sister Carmen? He moans. The blackness is nearly impenetrable, but I look closer because I desperately want her to be there. Because I need to tell Sylvia that I love her, and that I'm sorry. I knew something was wrong the night she died, but I didn't act. I could hear it in her voice when she spoke on the phone, but I chose to ignore it because the way she talked about Mom made me so angry. I could have saved her like she saved me, but I didn't. My eyes widen. I think I see something downstream. I convince myself something's there, a nebulous shape looming within the palisade of mangroves. My body's drifting forward over the lip of the boat. I murmur my sister's name, Sylvia. I wait. A hand streaked with crimson skin erupts from the brackish river. Bloated fingers wrap around my wrist and pull. I don't have time to scream. I lose my balance and topple over the side of the boat, dragged under by the flush red hand. Water surges into my chest when I attempt to breathe. Mud seeps into my stomach, causing it to spasm. I thrash, but it does nothing to slow my descent. My fingers ache for something to anchor onto. I can't determine if my eyes are open or closed. The darkness is all-consuming. I feel myself slipping away. Suddenly, something cold and sturdy grazes my palm. I use my remaining energy to squeeze it. The surface is smooth like metal. It's round and it fits nicely in my palm. Reflexively, I turn my wrist. There's a creak. My foot drifts forward and somehow finds solid ground. I'm stepping into my home. The door slams shut behind me. Ryan is racing down the hallway. I double over, coughing, hacking like there's something stuck in my lungs, and my vision is dappled with tiny pulsing dots. You don't remember anything about how you got home? The park bench squeaked as Ryan slid closer. He was sweating. His eyes darted between me and Elisa, who was pedaling her bicycle along a nearby path. I massaged his stone shoulders. I know, I really don't. I was at the bar top drinking. Some guy came up and bothered me, said some strange stuff, but he was harmless. Then 24 hours later I'm home. I pause, preparing another lie. But in between, nothing at all. Elisa, what did I say? Stay where I can see you. Startled, Elisa wobbled, then tumbled off her bike, landing knees first onto the pavement. Come here, love, I called out. Elisa pulled herself together, stood, and then began plodding over to us, dragging her bike by the handlebars. Fresh blood glistened across her kneecaps. I stopped the massage and started rifling through my purse. Never went anywhere without a few band-aids and Neosporin since we took her off training wheels. She slumped on the grass next to me, glare-eyed. Can I try to fix it? Her lips cracked into a delicate smile. I bent over and began smearing the antiseptic on her irradiated skin. And the guy you mentioned, the one in the suit? You don't think he, took advantage of the situation? What? I asked, lifting my head and throwing it over my shoulder. Ryan's pale blue eyes were wide and damp. Took me a second to realize what he was dancing around. For whatever reason, that was the farthest thing from my mind. Oh no, I don't think that freak did anything like that. Relief flooded over him. His shoulders seemed the slightest bit looser as he blotted a few tears with his shirt collar. Thank God. That said, maybe he spiked my drink. Not with Ruiz, with a hallucinogen. Something that could explain the amnesia. Can't say why anyone would dose a complete stranger. But my voice trailed off. Out of nowhere, every cell in my body began to buzz, and my attention was drawn to a man limping past us. His name was Matteo. He was well known in the neighborhood as a sweet but self-destructive man. Uncontrolled diabetes had ravaged his body. He couldn't see well, couldn't feel much below the waist. And worst of all, there was his foot, or what was left of it. From the shin down, the appendage was gangrenous, black like a cannonball and as cold as sleep, with a stench that could likely be appreciated from the upper atmosphere. When the tissue first went tits up, Matteo refused to get it amputated. We all assumed his days were numbered, and yet years later, here he was seesawing his way around, panhandling like usual. The necrotic tissue just never got infected, even though it absolutely should have. A perverse and sadistic miracle. Today, though, something was different. The flesh was moving, churning. The blackened skin peeking out from his dirt-caked sneaker snapped and bubbled like boiling tar, surreal and revolting. I looked to his face. He wasn't in pain, he wasn't in distress. He wore the hollow smile in the vacant eyes of a lifelong scavenger. Same as he always did. Nausea clawed at the back of my throat. I told myself it wasn't real. I tried to tear my eyes away, but God, I couldn't. There was something bewitching about the way his flesh churned. A pattern, meaning concealed within its beats and cadences. Something that needed to be felt to be completely understood. A tactile language like Braille. The tips of my fingers began throbbing. Bizarre notions took root in my mind. The way his flesh moved, something about it reminded me of Sylvia's voice. No, I thought that's absurd. But was it absurd? Speech is just a series of vibrations, right? Vibrations that could just as easily swim through dead meat as they could living vocal cords. No, I needed to get a grip. There was another explanation. I was exhausted. I was still under the effect of some hallucinogen. I was sick. No matter what I threw at it, though, the notion persisted. Some part of her was in that dead flesh. It was a paradox. The notion made no sense. And yet I'd never felt so sure of something. And all I had to do to know for certain was feel it move. I needed to touch Matteo's whispering foot. Needed to burrow my fingertips into the rot until I heard what she was saying. H, Mummy. Elisa's screech brought me back to reality. My lungs ached. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in minutes. Sorry, love. Here it is. I ripped the paper tabs from the Band-Aid and stuck it onto her knee. Only half paying attention, keeping Matteo fixed in my peripheral vision until he was well and truly out of sight. It was agonizing to let him go, like allowing free heroin to slip from your grasp when you're in seething withdrawal. I turned to Ryan. He was looking in Matteo's direction too, but his expression was flat, unbothered. He couldn't see what I could. As we left the park, Ryan made me promise to see a physician this week to address the amnesia, and a therapist within the month to address his conditions for forgiving my impulsive excursion abroad. I promised I would. That said, my mind was elsewhere. Michael, whoever he was, claimed he was granting me the ability to commune with Sylvia. Was this it? Did communion require some sort of medium flesh as the interface between the living and the dead? Had I missed my opportunity? I could only answer the last of those three questions. I hadn't missed my opportunity because I knew which alleyway Matteo slept in at night. The next morning, I returned to the factory for the first time since Sylvia's death. It was a strange and lonely homecoming. Not only was Sylvia gone, but Ryan was absent as well. The flu had been doing the rounds at Elisa's school. It was only a matter of time until she contracted it. He implored me to call out and take care of her, but I told him that was a bad idea. Although our workplace was much less exploitative than it had been when we were initially signed on, it was still run by a merciless organization whose patience could only be tested so much. Since he had continued to work while I was out on the few days of bereavement, my manager would afford me. It was important that I show my face. It was nicer than I anticipated. There was a blissful normality to the labor, the droning hum of the many sewing machines, the repetitive movements, the familiarity and the routine. The comfort, however, was fleeting. Before long, my fingertips began to throb. I thought of Matteo's whispering foot. Then my manager approached. Grace was a large woman with patchy gray hair and close-set eyes that seemed equally devoid of color. She stood over my station, tapping her foot as if she were waiting for me to do something, though I couldn't say what. Without warning, She started berating me. In essence, she was accusing Ryan and me of some sort of conspiracy, an attempt to defraud them. Why had there been only one of us present at any given time? What exactly were we trying to pull? Something to that effect. I don't remember precisely what she said. I couldn't focus on her paranoid rant. I was too distracted by her tongue. The flesh was whispering to me. Sylvia's voice. It was in there. I could tell by the way the wet muscle vibrated. I'd do anything to speak to my sister again, right? Yes, I would. I leaped from my chair, hand outstretched, reaching for her mouth. The suddenness of my outburst caught Grace off guard. She yelled, "Get back!" Before my fingers interrupted her, I cradled her tongue in my palm and pressed my fingertips into the warm, wiggling flesh. A panicked scream reverberated through the small bones in my wrist. I could feel Sylvia. I could almost hear her too. She was trying to tell me something, but her voice was muffled, coarse with static, like a call with a shoddy connection. As Grace's teeth began to clamp down, I dragged my fingertips across her tongue, arranging them into various configurations, trying to locate the pattern that would amplify this divine signal. Pain exploded across the back of my hand. I launched my arm back and ripped my hand from her mouth. Strips of skin peeled away under the pressure of her front tooth. The force caused Grace to fall backwards onto the floor. I stared at the traumatized woman. Blood trickled from her trembling lips. Her eyes were bulging, ripe with shock and fear. People were gathering around us. No one was exactly sure what happened. I shoved my injured hand into my pants pocket and pushed through the crowd. You'd think I'd have left the factory horrified and ashamed, but I walked home with a smile pinned to my jaw. I felt incredible. Waves of euphoria rushed through my body and collected in my fingertips. I was close. I was so very close. The police didn't come knocking that night. I was thankful but not entirely surprised. Maybe I mangled Grace's tongue and she couldn't speak. Maybe she didn't want the law snooping around the factory. The reason didn't matter. All that mattered was what I planned on doing next. Ryan was exhausted and turned in early. Elisa had been a handful apparently. Again I was thankful and I didn't bother asking questions. I felt like the world was paving the way, removing every barrier, keeping on a certain course, a path that could easily be confused for fate. Once I was sure my family was asleep, I left to find Matteo. The city was eerily quiet. I jogged from block to block without the urban white noise I was accustomed to, the blaring sirens and the distant music and the drunken chatter of passerbys. The night was silent and black like the river in the mangrove forest I may have drowned in. It was unnerving, but not enough to send me home, not even enough to slow me down. The euphoria I'd experienced earlier had completely disappeared. The throbbing in my fingertips resurfaced worse than ever. The pain was severe enough that I needed to cover my mouth with my uninjured hand and muffle a wail. I was approaching Matteo's alley and I didn't want the noise to scare him off. My wail gradually died down and the pain briefly subsided, but as I pulled my palm away, I caught a glimpse of fingertips in the murky glow of a street lamp. They were swollen. Pockets of clear fluid stretched the skin to its absolute limit in some places, surpassing it in others, creating paper-cut-sized slits that leaked blood-tinged fluid. What the hell was happening to me? Better yet, where was my head? I was skulking through the city in the dead of night, presumably unemployed with a sick kid at home to what? Commune with Sylvia through the flesh of some poor man. Yes, a voice in my mind said that's exactly what I was going to do. That voice grew louder and the impulse grew stronger, and eventually my legs began moving again. I wasn't jogging anymore. I was sprinting. Angry drivers blasted their horns as I raced across busy streets. I could have been hit, but I didn't care. I was focused. I was close. Matteo lived behind a local coffee shop. My heart sang when I saw their sign at the end of the block. I slowed my pace, steadied my breathing, and crept into the alleyway. A figure lay motionless atop a heated vent. Steam rose from beneath them, caressing their outline, giving them a shape in the inky darkness. His foot is necrotic, I reminded myself. Dead tissue means dead nerves. I might frighten him, but he won't feel any pain. I knelt down beside him, mesmerized by the vibrations radiating across his naked chin. I plunged my swollen fingertips into his flesh. There was resistance, much more than I anticipated. Then warmth licking my fingertips in a high-pitched guttural scream. Not the scream of an old man. The figure scrambled away from me. I caught a glimpse of their face in the moonlight. It was a young man with long hair and a deep scar transecting one of their eyebrows. They bolted from me and I didn't give chase. The mistake was sobering. I terrorized and maimed a stranger for nothing. Absolutely nothing. My stomach heaved. I stumbled to my feet and fled from the alleyway. Salty tears stung my eyes. My mind seemed irreparably fractured. As I bolted home, it kept flipping back and forth between two opposing conclusions. I was broken, lost, and completely insane. No, that's not it. I was given a gift, baptized in secret waters. I could commune with Sylvia. I could tell her I loved her, tell her I was sorry, and I was close. I just needed to keep trying. When I slinked through the front door, nothing had changed. No winner had been decided. It felt like I was being torn apart from the inside out. I staggered through our home, gripping my head with both hands like my skull would fall apart if I didn't hold it together. I pushed open our bedroom door and stepped through. Ryan was snoring, sound asleep. He'd help me. I'd wake him up, show him my fingers, tell him about Michael, beg for his forgiveness, and I stopped at the side of our bed and stood still. His entire body appeared to be vibrating. Every inch of visible skin was churning, silently swaying, undulating with Sylvia's voice, especially his eyelids, which rippled like the tide before a storm, graceful and treacherous. I reached both hands out. I hovered a thumb over each eyelid. She's in there. Sylvia's in his flesh, too. My mind demanded my muscles pressed down. Not hard enough to kill him, just enough to sunder his naked flesh. To rip him open and baptize his viscera. Do it! A voice inside me screamed. My thumbs shook. I was about to give in. I could practically feel the green-lit impulse flying down my nervous system. But before it arrived at my thumbs, my eyes landed on my empty ring finger. The memory of pawning my engagement ring flashed through my mind. Disbelief surged through my body. Why would I do something so cruel? That's not who I am. That's not how Sylvia raised me to be. My muscles relaxed. I moved my hands away. My mind felt clear for the first time in weeks, and I came to a realization. There's something dangerous living inside me, and it came from Ecuador. Night gradually turned to dawn. I remained in control, sipping stale coffee at the kitchen table, determining what to do next. The emergency room seemed like a safe choice, but some part of me resisted. They won't understand. They'll think I'm insane. They'll lock me away. Of course, the question became, is that really what I think? Or is that a suggestion from the thing inside me, a way to prevent me from getting help? A shrill noise erupted from my cell phone. I nearly jumped out of my skin, dropping my mug in the process. It shattered on the kitchen tile, launching ceramic shrapnel in every direction. I whispered, pulling the device from my pocket. Based on the sound, I assumed it was an Amber Alert. It wasn't. The notification read, "Emergency Alert System. Contagious disease warning for your area until further notice. Remain indoors. Click here or turn to Channel 8 for details." A sour dread swept through my gut. I raced into the living room, turned on the television, and flipped to Channel 8. There was a series of photographs on screen, squeezed between the news anchor and a banner that read, "Outback of unknown contagion. Victims assaulted others before disease proved fatal." To my profound horror, I saw a man with a scar across his eyebrow and a large woman with gray hair and close-set eyes. There were 4 other pictures, but I didn't recognize any of them. I scrambled to unmute the television. Originally thought to be under the influence due to their erratic behavior, health officials are now reporting that the perpetrators were likely suffering from some novel rabies-like infection. Though they refused to provide additional details for the time being, I felt something tugging at my shirt sleeve. I spun around, heart pounding, relieved to just see a groggy Elisa rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "When did we leave the park, Mommy?" I asked her to repeat herself, but the question didn't change. I said, "When did we leave the park?" "We were there. We're here now." Doesn't make much sense. I don't remember the in-betweens. My heart fell through the floor. She didn't recall the previous 24 hours. She had amnesia. My eyes slowly drifted to the Band-Aid on her knee. I reached out a damp, trembling hand and peeled it off. There was a small, crescent-shaped trench over her kneecap. I carefully hovered my swollen finger above it. A perfect fit. I'm starting to believe my mom abandoned Sylvia and me for a very specific reason. I think she was creating distance, keeping us away from Ecuador and from herself, because I'm infected with something from my mother's country. Something that wants to spread, something that infiltrates your mind, something that would have said anything to convince me to plunge my disease fingers into other people's flesh. Worst of all, I've given it to my daughter too. Compared to my manager and the man in the alley, we seem to react differently to whatever this infection is. For whatever reason, it doesn't kill us. I suspect the truth is hidden in our bloodline. God, Elisa is a smart kid. Empathetic too. She picked up on my distress almost immediately, even if she didn't understand it. She hugged my leg, peered up at me with her pale blue eyes and asked, "So what now?" I swallowed my despair and forced a smile. I don't know, love. The pain in my fingertips was worsening. I was terrified for Elisa. The pain was coming for her too. All I know is whatever we do, we'll do it together. I picked her up and started walking towards the door. And I won't leave your side again, okay? Promise? My smile grew. For the first time since Sylvia's death, it was real. Yes, Elisa. I promise. I haven't left my house in a few years. I have lost count of how many exactly, to be honest. After the first few months, it kind of stopped bothering me as well. I didn't really feel the need to be outside. What is it good for here? I'm well fed, comfortable, entertained, and safe. A combination of things I would never have if I stepped out. I have felt kind of strange lately, however. I can feel some kind of weirdness when I'm close to anything leading out, like windows or doors. It's hard to describe. You know that feeling when you know you are being watched so intently that it's as if your clothes didn't exist and your thoughts were written on your forehead. It's like that in a sense, but increasing the closer I am to even be looking out. At first I attributed it to my anxiousness. Stepping up after not even seeing the sun for so long, maybe my mental was just messed up. Problem is, I don't think I even see sunlight coming from the windows anymore. The tape of course doesn't help, but you would imagine at least some light coming from between it or piercing it, right? Then comes the thing that maybe sounds weird to you all, but that at the time made no difference for me. The topic of food. How do I get groceries? That type of stuff. Well, I don't know. I remember vividly I ordered most of my food at the beginning, as well as me having the money to always afford it somehow. At some point, my orders stopped going through, but food kept showing up inside the house. You would think this is a real red flag, right? Well, this didn't bother me too much. In fact, I was excited. Who wouldn't be happy to get free food? That thought process was so liberating, right until the feeling I mentioned started. The food started showing up less often, and when it does, even touching it feels dirty. The consistency is fine, but there's this prickling in the back of my head, as if I was going through radioactive waste. I started to notice how different I look when the pain from hunger started. I can feel my bare bones in every touch. My sunken cheeks are so sunken, I probably look like a blinking corpse, as I barely have energy to do anything else most of the time. It has been 3 days since the last time I received any food, and hunger slapped me out of the stupor. I've tried to look up multiple times if there is something going on in my city or the world. But there are no related news, as if everything is normal outside. But how does this make any sense? I feel the dread from every opening in my house increasing every single day, and may even be hallucinating from hunger, as I can see shadows and curious-looking figures from the corners of my eyes every single time I turn my head. So, I decided to remove the tape and finally look outside of my windows. There is no window behind the tape. It is a wall. They are all walls behind the tape. I don't think there is any point in discussing this. I don't think I have the time to figure out any other solutions before hunger makes me unable to even act on any plan. I know the door is not a wall, as I have already felt its texture many times since the situation began, so I will open the door today. I decided to write this in case hunger takes me, or if the outside takes that first. If I survive, I will get back to you all. Farewell.